We welcome you to the November meeting of the Logan-Cache Airport Authority Board. We'll begin by asking for a motion to approve the minutes from the October meeting.
I move approval of the October minutes.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and second. We approve the minutes from the October 3rd meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Kate, welcome to our meeting. Kate is one of the interns that we have working with Bob at the airport. She, along with the other two, were introduced in October. They're in their final legs of getting their degree in airport management. They're getting some hands-on experience. And Kate's been asked to make Bob's report. He's out of town attending the graduation ceremony for his son. Go ahead, Kate.
Do I need to press anything, or should it just work? Okay, perfect. So at the airport this past month, we were able to complete a review of the airport emergency plan meeting. We did this with the local agencies, USU, and Leading Edge. We were able to create a comprehensive personnel training curriculum, part of the Part 139 requirements. This is for new hire and reoccurrent training for our previous employees. The annual snow removal meeting was done back in October. This was with Public Works, basically just to review the snow removal plan and any expectations that follow that. Extra attention has been given to our snow removal equipment, ensuring the batteries are healthy, lights are operational, and the blows and the blowers are fully functional. Lastly, the auxiliary windsock and power installed at the north end of the runway is functioning as expected and will enhance pilot awareness during night flights.
Any questions for Kate?
Thank you. Thanks for your good work.
What to do about the tower? We've had some estimates, and we didn't do it was basically unlimited as to what the options were, from just some basic drying in to a full restoration. We still don't have a definite approval on the grant from the state. We still anticipate that that is coming. We've had 4 different contractors look at it, 3 of them general. And basically they had the opportunity to make recommendations as to how to proceed. I did get a call as I was coming in this morning to indicate that the site has been tested for asbestos, and so that's about a $10,000 cost that we will not have to pay to mitigate because there is no asbestos on site.
Good news.
What I would propose is that the board authorize Ryan and I to meet with Bob and put together, now that we have been somewhat informed by the contractors, put together a specification that they can each respond to and give us their best take on the same objectives. Then when we do get approval for the grant, then we will know how to proceed. Questions or further suggestions?
I do have one comment. I'd also like to see a number just to demolish it, just so we know what kind of the baseline is if we just decide that it's really so much money to fix. Again, we really haven't identified a use for it. We know that we can't make it ADA accessible just given the structure. There really is no good use. I mean, it would be you know, if it's just simply a historic, you know, item standing there with no use, that is one thing, but, you know, do we have a better use for that space if it's quite expensive to restore? So I'd at least like to know what that, you know, an estimate on just demolishing it.
Okay.
I mean, does Armstrong, I mean, at this point, you haven't really made plans for that space as part of the master plan simply because the tower's there. Correct. But again, my guess is that space could be utilized for something else. I mean, it's not a huge footprint, but, so, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I had that question too. What is it that we're asking them to build, or are we just asking them to patch up the things that are damaged or worn out, or are we asking them to build in this bid some different kind of pathway or structure or form inside?
I have a thought on that one, Chair, if I can. I think that one, we can we should, like the mayor said, we should have a price to demo and see what that is like. I think the first step is to clean and to have it so that it can be a space that we can even work in. So there is a lot of old carpet and mildew and some of that's danger. And to clean that and to put the windows, to fix the windows in the roof, just to dry it in. And then be able to, whether we want to have it as a showpiece. As Dr. Jones said, we don't have something that welcomes people very well at our airport. And so my thought would be, you know, if we could get it so that it looks nice and had it maybe painted a mural. I think that Logan's done a mural on one of yours and had a very good press. I think it's looked very well. But we could have something painted on the outside. We could pretty it up. Obviously, the inside will never be an operating tower for us. That I don't think will ever happen. So we're not looking to make this into a tower to replace something else. But I think that the reason we kept it was possibly to have an entrance or something to pretty up that entrance to the airport. And so, because when people come, there really isn't a great, hey, welcome to the airport. And I think that this, in my mind, and I think that's part of the discussion, is what do we want to see at that? And if we had that entrance, and maybe I see that as painting and having a very nice door. It doesn't function well. It's not going to function much, but it will be a welcoming sign to the public as they come to the airport. And I think if we can stay within that grant and have very little cost to it, that's where I'm currently at. I don't want to see it restored to its old glory of everything because I just don't think we have the money or effort to do that. That's my thought.
And it's good it doesn't have asbestos. That's good news for whatever we do. But again, it's been open for so long. I mean, I just wonder if we've got mold going on in there. I mean...
Yeah, and I think we do. I mean, I think with the carpet in there, I think you'd find that we have some. But I think if we had somebody come in and just clean it and do that, then we could have it dried in. And then if we did decide that there was some future use, we could come back and do that. It might be a nice observatory for a pilot lounge or something else, but I don't know what it'll be. Anyway, that's my thought.
The application for the grant, which was attractive to the state, was that it be a historical site. Not necessarily on a register as such, but as an integral part of the history of the Logan-Cache Airport.
But they didn't make any specific requirements on the interior, did they?
I haven't seen that.
Oh, we're
I
still
don't believe
waiting
so.
for the...
We still haven't received that grant, but based on the submission was that it be an icon of Logan's history. If we don't do that, then we don't get the grant.
Obviously, yeah,
So-
right.
Other comments or suggestions? You feel good about Ryan and I trying to define the limits and moving ahead to that point?
Right, as long as, so the people that bid on it know exactly what they're bidding on, and we're comparing apples to apples, and then as long as we get an estimate for demolition as kind of a just a, an additional item of
Alternative.
consideration.
Yeah. Do we need a motion to that effect?
I move that we have John and Ryan prepare bids to restore the tower and also get an estimated price on demolition.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that Ryan and I be a subcommittee to define the work on the tower and get bids for its repair and restoration and also compared to demolition. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Scott, are you spokesman?
Yeah, I am. Good morning. Thank you for your time. Scott Weaver with Leading Edge Aviation, here with Chris Slayton, Colton, our architect we've retained for the project. And my parents, Don and Jackie, have been mentor and big supporters of me. Is that better? We're asking for your support this morning to first move our current FBO building to a new location on the airport and then construct a new modern FBO terminal. Timing with your approval. First phase is to complete engineering drawings and get all the permits required. Plug that in. Armstrong put an exhibit together for us, just to kind of show you where we'd move the existing FBO building. Up there. Doesn't like this, huh? Just a PDF. She's pulling that up, I'll show you. So our second phase would be to build the foundation and relocate the existing FBO building, which I'd like to have that completed by summer, fall of 25. Phase 3 is to construct a new FBO terminal and hopefully have that completed by summer of 26. Grand opening. Chris, I'll let you come up and go through your amazing designs. Pull everything up.
Well, and the audience doesn't have it, but we do have, I mean, we have some good pictures here, so.
Maybe your USB will work better.
It's not an issue with this, it's an issue. I don't.
Well, they have pictures, I guess you can.
We can talk, we can chat.
I mean, does someone in the audience want one? I mean, Jeannie and I could share if someone wants to take my packet. Is there anyone that particularly wants to see? Anybody else wants one?
As Scott kind of explained the process and the phasing, the focus of the presentation we put together is mainly the new FBO and how it would look and how it would function and what the parts and pieces of it all are. I don't want to bore you by going through every room and space, but essentially, if you've got floor plans of it, you can see that there's about a 12,000 square foot hangar facility that also incorporates charter groups in kind of an ancillary space adjacent to the hangar. The main offices replace the current FBO functions, but add some parts to the facility that they don't have right now. Certainly, more modern kind of terminal lobby for the public as well as their pilots. We have conferencing areas where businesses can come and have a space where they can broaden their business without leaving the airport area. There are obviously the administrative offices. Upstairs we have spaces specifically for pilots to refresh, to eat, to prepare for their next flight. The architecture itself, we felt like just really needed to be modern, clean, kind of aeronautic in its forms and shapes. The color palette, we tried to keep pretty neutral. We kind of lean into the blue and silvery gray tones. Where it is, a big part of this is that it's the home of the Aggies and Utah State, and felt that keeping true to that kind of color palette in a subtle way was important. The materials are all insulated metal panels, of course glass. We've also used some Galvalume, it's called, but it's more a metallic looking panel. So it kind of reminds you of aeronautic wings and airplane forms. And so we feel like it's simple, it's classic, it's new and fresh, and it'll really become a face for the airport as far as a new building and a new structure and a new place. As far as the functions, Scott can probably address that even better, and other things that I might not have touched on.
You did a great job.
But do you have any questions about the architecture itself or the building materials, size?
Could you go over the map a little bit? That's what I'd be curious about. You have where the current FBO is. Where's the new one? Where's it proposed to move temporarily, or that?
The bottom right is where the current building is,
Right here.
and that's the space Armstrong said we could build.
That this would be built on, okay?
And then we move the building, you can see the red circle to the left.
This one here.
Blue square, that's where the new building footprint would be.
So the current one will move to here,
Correct.
and then this is where this one will be built.
Yes.
I think it looks amazing. I think it looks great.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure, being new on the board, I'm not sure what our commitment decision is. Because obviously it'll go through a building process and through the city's process of things, but I certainly support having a new FBO. I've been a user of the current one, and I certainly appreciate the work it looks like you've put into this one, so I'm certainly a supporter of that. So
Basically, there would need to be kind of a new lease based on, the change space and so on, but
So ours is a lease of expanding the lease. Is that kind of our role?
I would assume so. I mean,
Two, one, expand the existing lease to the north. and approve a new site to the north, excuse me, southwest, as indicated on our plans. Yet to be numbered, but
Yeah, I mean,
So they're gonna build something in this blue square?
the existing building is going to be relocated to that blue square.
To this one?
Yes,
They're gonna pick it up and move it?
a piece at a time.
Okay. And does this tear down some building we have here?
That will tear down their existing building.
But,
Which tear down is tear down piece by piece and relocate. It's a pre-engineered building, and so the plan is that we create about a 6-foot concrete foundation above grade, which is going to allow us to essentially drop the old FBO right down on top of that foundation and increase its height and make the hangar space better functioning and more stable. But we feel like the building can be repurposed and relocated because of the type of building it is.
so you're not rebuilding on site. It's not a temporary move and then you're coming back to the original space. It's a permanent,
Yeah,
different location.
Right.
And that location, I assume, functions well for you, and, or you wouldn't be proposing it, so.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
And Armstrong, they said it would be okay there.
so,
And then the use of the building in its new location, what?
Our future plans is to run our piston maintenance shop in that building.
Okay.
And then grow into turbine maintenance.
And looking at the blue rectangle labeled FBOE on the map that represents the location of the new building, it looks like it overlaps Airport Drive. Is that on purpose?
That's what Armstrong gave us the footprint to build in. If you look on the drawing, you'll see the actual, the pictures, but the existing building,
site plan.
you can see through there and then what our footprint would be. So we're not gonna take that entire space. There's a storm drain and
You're looking at
different
A100.
utilities.
Yes. A1. You have, is yours A100?
Isn't it the bottom, A100?
Drawing coming in.
Shows the building footprint superimposed over Armstrong's.
So when it shows on the blue square of the overhead aerial map, when it shows with that blue rectangle overlapping the road and parking lot area, is it actually just replacing it with new parking lot road area? Is that what I'm seeing? Or is it,
It would take probably half of that parking lot.
Which parking lot when you say that?
The one right next to our building.
Yes,
these cars
okay,
here?
yeah.
I'm not sure we're looking at the same, yeah,
yeah, right
So
here.
this is the parking lot.
you can kind of see where the parking goes to about here now. And so we're eclipsing some of it, but maintaining the flow.
But the access, the entrance and access is still gonna be maintained into the gate and everything like that,
Correct,
right?
yes.
The only thing that we suggested is that we had a bus drop-off space where charter groups could drop off and come into the charter entrance and come through that process before they come out to the tarmac.
Okay.
That island is probably not gonna work with snowplows.
I-
you know.
I always default to smarter people like civil engineers for when we really get into that. But whether that's even a raised island or not, but yeah, it's a little, there's a lot to still be determined and figured out for sure.
But our idea is whether we're willing to lease it to you. I think it's
Yeah,
great.
before we continue on with the expenses, we'd
Sure.
obviously like your approval to continue.
Yeah, I think it's a great improvement.
I'd make a motion that we approve it to move forward with the process and to grant that ability to, I mean, you'll have to work with our manager on the actual lease and getting all of that, but I would move that we approve you moving forward.
I would second that, and I just want to thank you for this vision and for, I kind of feel like this is, we hired Dr. Jones to come in here and give us some suggestions on how we can do things better at the airport, and this is one of his suggestions. And I appreciate you hearing that, listening to it, and taking action to remedy it. This looks beautiful. I think this would be an incredible improvement for our airport, so thank you so much for being willing to do this.
Good. And just one heads up about, I mean, your next step, I think, would probably be to go to Logan City for the Planning Commission. It generally takes at least a month to even get on the agenda. So why don't you call someone in planning, see what their dates are, and then at least, you know, get a stake in the ground. Hopefully you might have some things to finish up. But.
Obviously, the owners, as well as us and the planning department, honor this group and wanted us to make sure that we had sat down and gotten your feedback and opinion on the design before we even approach the planning commission, but that would be our next step.
Yeah. And again, it sounds like Lochner, as far as it fits well into the master plan, so that's great.
Thanks.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the lease expansion and the new site for the maintenance shop. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Barb Howling. Marv requested an opportunity to speak to the lease that was amended and approved at our last meeting. Thank you.
So, thank you for allowing me some time here. Just to recap, from my perspective, I was here at the meeting last month, and Bob Lowe presented 8 suggested changes for the lease rates for the hangars, and there was some discussion. But that was the first time, at least that I had heard of the really proposed the 8 items, and the board heard them and had some discussion, and the chair asked if there was any input from the audience, and at that time I was busy noting the 8 items, and these are from my notes, so I don't know, I didn't see the minutes until recently for last meeting. But these were the notes that I took, and I didn't stand up and make a comment then. So I've been thinking about it for this whole month, and I wanted to make a comment here on the lease rates. So just to go over what I think the changes were going to be, and I've actually have a few spare copies if anyone wants to see those. The ones that I heard, and if I got these incorrect, I'm happy to change them. The first one was that the lease area would be adjusted from the footprint of the actual building to the area of the building site. So we would be, rather than just the footprint of the building, it would be the whole site that would be leased. Number 2 was that the increase of the yearly lease rate would go from 22 cents per year to 37 per square foot for most sites, and 47 for sites that were on the flight line, which I assume, so yeah, out on the actual ramp is how I understood that. Number 3 was that the lease rate increases were very minimal over the past time of the leases, but the change here was that now the leases would change yearly, tied to the annual cost of living. I think that was a federal cost of living rate. Maybe it was a Utah state cost of living rate. But in any case, it would be adjusted each year. Number 4 was the one-time hookup fee of $1,000 for new hangars. Number 5 was hangar owners were responsible for all utilities, no change there. Number 6, leases were for 10 years with an option to extend for another 10 years. Number 7 was that the lease can be terminated for violations of lease agreement. And that one I noted was such as hangars being used for non-aviation purposes. And then number 8 was liability insurance requirements of $1 million for all hangars. So as I looked over all those, the two that I specifically want to comment on, and that's number 1 and number 8. So number 1, the lease area would be adjusted to the actual building, or excuse me, from the actual building site to the site, and that one I've got essentially 7 reasons why I would argue against that one. The first one is that the area that makes up the site is very arbitrary. Most hangar owners didn't locate their own hangar. It was placed there in many cases back in before many of us were born, and so it's not really our decision of where the hangars were located. They are where they are, and if anyone's, if there's some blame to be had, it's planners in the past, not the current hangar owners. So that's my first one. It's very arbitrary. If we go to an airport map, which we could, it's very hard to tell where sites even start and end. So that is the first point is who would, well, I'll keep going. Number 2 is the provision is biased against small hangar owners. And so I just did a quick little study on the 3rd page. If you go back to that, for example, if you had a hangar that was a large hangar, 120 by 120, and it used to be 22 cents per square foot, that would have been $3,000, approximately $3,000 a year. And if you switch that over to the new rate and the new site, and assuming, this is an assumption, that you're adding 10 feet around the whole building. So 10 feet on either side, 10 feet behind, 10 feet in front of. Then you do that calculation, and it turns out to $7,200. So it would increase the cost for that hangar owner by a factor of 2.3. So it's 130% increase, which is pretty substantial. But a lot of it is going from 22 cents per square foot up to 37 cents per square foot, which was discussed. However, if you go, and I'll jump all the way down to a 30 by 30 hangar, if you put 10 feet behind, 10 feet in front, and 10 feet on either side, then it switches it to a pad of 50 by 50 times 37 cents per square foot. So it would go from approximately $200 per year to $930 a year, so a factor of 4.7. So you're increasing for a small hangar, it's like getting hammered. That's unbelievable, is a factor of 4.7 increase. And so it's just it increases depending on the size. So it's incredibly regressive in that larger hangars are not penalized as much as smaller hangars, depending on how the assumptions of where the site starts and ends, and nobody knows that. So this past week, I actually was down. We just recently, my partners and myself, we've moved from the flight line to renting a T hangar to now we just recently purchased a hangar back in like June. And we've been trying to sign a lease since June and told that we had to wait. And now I went out and talked to Bob Lowe, and I know he wasn't going to be here today. He mentioned that he was going to be away, so I understand that. He's very reasonable person, agreeable, but I don't think that Bob should be going out on every hangar site with the tape measure and saying, well, here's kind of a reasonable thing to do, let's do that, let's do this. It's just very arbitrary. So let's keep going here. Number 3 says, who's tasked with determining the site area? So if we're going to determine site areas for every hangar in the airport, we ought to just do it. And so that's going to take, I'm assuming, a surveyor to go around and say, here's the sites. And I think quickly we'll determine that it's super arbitrary because some hangars on some taxiways have space behind, space in front of. Nobody wanted a space behind. It just happened. So anyway, number 4, existing hangar owners had no or very little input. Number 5, hangar owners must keep, if the lease includes the grounds around the site, then my assumption would be that people will have that lease site and start to store stuff outside of the hangars. And I'm not sure that's where we want to go as an airport, where, you know, what I mean is if we have 10 feet on all around my hangar, do we want to have stuff stored in those areas? Or, you know, just expanding? Or do we want to keep it nice and tidy, which I think it is. Currently, to me, when I drive around, a lot of the hangars are older and so on, but they look nice, they look tidy, everything's good and inside. Continuing on. Number 6, if there is a concern for encouraging proper land use in the future. I actually emailed Ryan on this. Well, let me finish my statement. If there is a concern for encouraging proper land use in the future, the airport board has the control of future development and can dictate building sizes and siting for all new hangars. So if the idea to charge a lease for the site is somehow to penalize people who have a poorly sited hangar, then the airport board can be involved in any future development of how things are sited, right? That's reasonable for anything new, and therefore in the future it can be much more controlled and planned out. And then number 7, I have been told that the new lease structure will only affect the new lease signers, and I've been, as I mentioned, been trying to sign a lease for about 5 months now and haven't been able to. So I think that this arbitrary, incredibly, regressive sort of lease rate is really going to impact people who got stuck, kind of like me, that we'll have to sign a new lease, and people in the future will not be there. Now, on this point, I'll pause here. I don't know if there's other comments, but I just wanted to make all of these things known that that particular item, I think increasing the rate, I did look up a whole bunch of other rates in other states, not just Ogden Airport or others here. That Ogden, I don't think, is incredibly comparable to us here in Logan, and many have expressed and I think the board even, we don't really want to be like Ogden in any way. But so I looked at other states, and some of their leases are higher and some are lower, but the idea of increasing our rates from the 22 cents per square foot up to the 37 and 47 is reasonable. I'm like, okay, yep. That's the way we go. So of those items that were suggested, the only 2 that I really would like the board to reconsider is number 1, which is the one I've been talking about, and then number 8 I was going to address here in a moment. But any, I don't know. Questions?
I mean, I think that's something we could have a discussion about, at least number 1. Item 8, I mean, liability insurance is pretty important to both the city and the county. I mean, again, because we're the owners of the airport, if there were an event, I mean, we would, have some liability. And so I absolutely do think we need to have the hangars have some liability. I mean, everything the city does, whether it's a construction project or a special event, we require whoever's doing that to have some liability insurance that they carry.
Yeah, because if the hangar burns down and it burns down somebody else's hangar next door, who's
Yeah.
responsible for that?
Yeah.
Well, so each owner would have to, many owners would have liability insurance, but I guess my point is, what is the loss to the airport if a hangar burns down to the
Well,
ground?
Like I say, what if the,
Fire spread, the Great Chicago Fire, that really changed the way we look at fire. That's the reason why I have fire insurance, is because of that fire.
Okay.
Because it killed hundreds of people and burned square miles, like more than 3 square miles of the city. Fire spread. We had the fire out in Hiram at that storage unit a few years back. It caused over $5 million worth of damage. And this was just storage units with junk in them, basically. I don't know. It's people's treasures, but it wasn't airplanes, is my point. These were units that didn't have airplanes in them, and it caused over $5 million of damage. So that's the reason why it's fire spread.
And that's why
But-
you have to have insurance on your storage unit now.
well, yeah. And it's like the state. I mean, drivers should have insurance, but not every, I mean, the state mandates that
Yeah.
all drivers carry liability insurance. They don't have to insure their vehicle. And again, that's kind of the hangar owner's option if they choose not to insure their property. But we do need some kind of a liability insurance as an airport authority. I feel pretty strongly about that one.
Okay, so, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on this. This is really good. I
Yeah, we appreciate
this
your
analysis that you've done. And this is exactly the kind of analysis that policymakers should have before they make decisions. Because this is helpful for us to understand the impacts of these things. And it is interesting to me, the difference in impact on small hangars versus large hangars. And that's not necessarily my goal in adjusting these rates. However, my overall goal is I want the airport to be financially sustainable. And how exactly we get there doesn't matter as much to me as the fact that we get there. And we've got a budget that has to be funded every year, and we don't have enough revenue to cover that budget. And the budget that we have, our $1.2 million budget that we currently have, is insufficient to cover the needs of the airport. As we saw in the recent analysis conducted by Dr. Jones, there are a lot of things we should be doing, including many safety-related items, and we're not there yet. And in our current arrangement, about 20% of the funding for the airport is being subsidized by the county and the city. And what that means is that every citizen in this county is helping to pay for that airport. And I could make an argument for why that is a good economic policy, that everybody benefits from having that airport there. However, you could also make the argument that the people using the airport are the ones who should pay for the airport. And some single mom who lives here in Logan shouldn't be having to subsidize that with her taxes. So we're trying to get to the point where we have enough revenue to pay for what needs to happen at the airport. And how exactly we get there, we have a few things that we're looking at, and lease rates are one of them. I personally think that this isn't enough, that what we've changed it to isn't enough. Maybe we need to tweak how we calculate it and shift the burden a little bit between smaller and larger hangars. I think that's something we should look at. But overall, I think we need to do more. I think there needs to be more done to generate more revenue to pay for the increasing needs at the airport. And whether we're gonna nickel and dime our users by charging them a fee for this or a fee for that, or we just charge everybody one big fee that covers everything, I don't really care. Again, we have to have the revenue is the important part. We have so many needs and we don't have enough revenue. That's the root issue here. So I think about these lease rates, and it still bewilders me why they're so low. Because I've looked at lease rates of other properties around the valley, and I haven't seen anything that's this cheap. Those storage units that we were talking about that caught fire in Hiram, you could go rent a storage unit out there and it would be more expensive than something that is on the flight line at an airport that is very, very, very valuable real estate, because that's the only place, you can't fly an airplane out of a storage unit. You can out of one of these hangars. And these lease rates are so cheap. I don't understand that. I really don't understand why they're so cheap. And I think if really we wanted to look at comparisons, I don't think we should look at what do other airports charge throughout the state or what do other airports charge in other states. If we're going to look at comparisons, I think we look at comparisons on our own airport. Let's look at the rates that are being charged by private owners of hangars who are renting them out to pilots. That's the accurate rate. That's the actual market rate.
A couple of comments on that. As I was looking at rates, I noticed in most airports there's a significant difference between commercial rates and private rates as well. So and many of us, including those in, as my friend Robert mentions, South Rampistan. So if you're a private owner and then there's typically a different rate, because you have one plane sitting in your small hangar compared to commercial operations that are using them more. So that's one. Another thing is that I've noticed on the rents, then rent can be quite high because of the difficulty in getting a hangar. So it's a supply demand kind of an issue, which can be addressed by my item number 7. I personally, this one, leases can be terminated for violators of lease agreements, such as using a hangar for non-aviation purposes. I'm sure there's many hangars that are not being used for aviation purposes. I think that that's another area. I did actually notice that if airports have space that they use for non-aviation purposes, they often charge 4 times as much for those because it's a commercial non-aviation purpose. Now I know FAA has requirements about only using for FAA or aviation purposes. But I did see that in some airports that they have non-aviation charge 4 times more than for aviation purposes. So there's another one. You go around, if somebody is not using it for aviation purposes, bam, 4 times as much. I mean, I agree. So the rates of 37 and 47, coming back to that, even if those go up, and they will go up every year now, which makes sense, but I think there's only a few new lease signers that are going to get hit.
There's a lot of leases that have expired. So
Okay.
there will be new lease signers
So,
as well.
so yeah, and if we want to go, if you as a board would like to go a little higher on the, even more than the 37, 47, it's more equitable, in my opinion, than doing the thing with the site. I would put up a map of the airport and see if any of us in this room could figure out how to determine a site. Because
We did determine sites when they were building those hangars, and they all have setbacks, and we used to talk about them in planning commission. And so each each hangar is set on its own quote-unquote lot.
can you find that anywhere? They're all over. And actually, when we purchased our hangar, it said that our acreage was 0.01 acres. Now, if we want to charge $1 a square foot, I'm good on 0.01 acres, but I don't see any site. I would love to.
We did that for years. So
And if you look at you guys can picture the airport. Maybe we could put it up here. But some of the hangars, you could say, holy cow, that site is monstrous. You want to go all of that. And if somebody put, didn't properly cite their hangar, do they get to pay for I would love it. I would love to see that, and I'm sure we'd all be convinced it's very arbitrary.
I think that's an excellent point. I think it's something that we should look into. I do think we should revisit our lease, and I think there are some more improvements we could make to it, and I think we should have some discussion. So I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. I would like to have some discussions with Bob about that, because the main goal I want, like I mentioned, is I want us to generate sufficient revenue to cover the expenses of the airport, but I also want this process to be simple.
Yeah.
If we have to do a custom measurement on every one, that is difficult to conduct, and that ends up with something that is treating some hangar owners differently than others in a way that's not fair. I don't necessarily want it to be set up that way. Well, I don't want it set up that way. And I actually would like us to look at the lease rate and the way that it's changed annually and try to figure out a way to make it uniform as possible, so that we don't have our staff having to do calculations on different numbers, and one number gets multiplied by this and starts with a different number, and we have so many different rates. I would love it if we could come up with some kind of a more uniform rate structure, such as the board adopting annually what the lease rate is, and then that's the lease rate for everybody who has a lease that allows for that. So I appreciate your research and your input. I would like us to have some more discussions about this and maybe bring back a tweaked lease at some future meeting.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your time. Bob was very cordial to work with. Everything is great. I told him I wasn't going to stab him in the back, and since he wasn't going to be here, I talked with him about my particular situation. But I guess I'd leave with my argument would be, even if we increase the square foot lease rate for the buildings, the simplest and most straightforward way would be increase those rates, but unless the board sets out what the site really is for each hangar, I would really oppose it, because it's very arbitrary.
Thanks, Marv.
Thank you.
And we will schedule that for future discussion. Sean Beld, you've been busy.
Well, we've been busy because we're a team. But yes, good morning. I'm Sean Milne. I work for the Bear River Association of Governments, Director of Community and Economic Development and Intergovernmental Affairs. Today I'm speaking to you on behalf of Cache County, operating in the function of Economic Development Director. And these next two agenda items, I'm going to be conversational with you this morning, but should you want any supporting material or any additional information, feel free to either ask here or I can send you some supplemental via email if you'd like. So on this first agenda item, we've had a number of site visits as of late, and I think all but Jeannie here that are left on the panel today are aware of those. And I'd say and characterize that all three of those have been wildly successful. The first was a set of 3 different site selectors. So for the benefit of the recording and maybe those in the audience that may not be aware, but site selectors are a unique kind of folks that most of us would be familiar with a real estate agent or a broker and know what they do for us either on the seller or buyer side. When you're in corporate America and you might be one of those Fortune 5,000 companies and don't necessarily want your next closest competitor to know, you might be looking to either move your corporate headquarters, expand to a new location. You might choose to hire the services of site selectors that will anonymize you and look for elements that meet your criteria, kind of like a matchmaker in the dating world. So think of it as like Tinder for companies. And these folks exist throughout the country and have different levels of sophistication, and most of them specialize in an industry or few out of all of those that are possible. And we hosted 3 of them last month, maybe September, actually, the end of September. And by we, I mean the state of Utah primarily, and then those of us within the northern Utah area that got to play host to them. And so we did, and I'd mentioned the airport in several of our conversations. As recently as yesterday, I had a follow-up Zoom call with one of them. These 3 individuals were from San Diego, Chicago, and North Carolina, dominantly representing different manufacturing niches, but one does have some aerospace and defense kind of concentration as well. So I'm continuing to showcase the airport under the premise of economic development to see what we can do to help, as Executive Zook noted, kind of diversify our revenue streams, certainly in accordance with what Dr. Jones suggested to this board and that you guys have expressed being keen to do. The next 2 were actual site visits to our airport as a primary focus, meaning that those businesses either want to be on airport property or at least adjacent to it. The first is a company by the name of Dynamic Aviation. They were a bit shielded and veiled about their name prior to the visit. We ended up making their short list of only 2 airports they're interested in the state of Utah, ours and one other that will go unnamed because I don't want to give them any credibility. But they are a good competitor. They dropped some others off before they'd been here from their list. They were very impressed. I want to thank Bob, even though he's not here today, for making several arrangements, as well as several other team members from Executive Zook's office that helped navigate that day. I was on vacation, and I drove back just from my vacation for this meeting, and then drove back by the end of the day at the south end of the state with family and friends. So it's kind of a big deal. This company primarily operates out of the Shenandoah Valley. That's where their 3rd generation ownership has their corporate headquarters based, but they also have some FOBs in the Middle East and Latin America and perform MRO operations on planes, so maintenance, repair, some upgrades. And they're keen on us because specifically of some of the other local employers that we have. And Mr. Kerwin showed up representing the Airport Authority in its totality. We had a number of other visitors from USU because of the importance of both their maintenance program and their flight school. And the gentlemen were nothing but complimentary. And, if I believe them at face value, and I do, they were very candid with us afterwards and have been in conversations I've had with company representatives since. I've been in contact with 3 of them, that they didn't expect us to show as well as we did. So they would look for some property on the airport. They would likely look at property to be new construction. At this point, I'll pause and see if Mr. Kerwin would like to add anything about that particular site visit. Sir?
It was exciting to view their excitement.
Yeah.
And it shifted to the course of the meeting. It was a growing excitement as more and more information was shared.
Would absolutely agree with that. They do this MRO work on anything as large as a 737. They have over 150 planes in their fleet, down to a King Air. So they vary quite a bit in size, though they skew a little bit more towards those smaller sizes. So we'll see how that comes along. Just to give some, manage expectations. The question was asked, and they might have a decision in 12 to 18 months. So these are never quick, decisions, but just to put that out there. The second one was much like the first. It's from a company called Beta. It's also on the East Coast. Both of these came as a result of GOEO, the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, or GOEO. Their outreach, and 47G, of which I realized coincidentally as I was walking in the building this morning, I'm wearing their pullover because it's a little brisk. But 47G, as you may know, represents Utah's aerospace and defense industry. And the county has become a member of that organization because of the importance of aerospace and defense industry employers and OEMs in the area. Talk about that a little bit more in the next agenda item, so I'll skip over going into some detail. But these entities have made quite the pitch to try to recruit and retain existing aerospace and defense corporations that are big factors of employment and tax base within the state. On the whole, and if you include cyber and IT services that are relevant to this under the defense moniker, aerospace and defense makes up roughly 20% of the state's GDP, so it's sizable and very significant for us. So Beta is the second company that came out. They had a couple of individuals. I want to thank Logan City and CVE, Cache Valley Electric specifically. They were fantastic hosts. I wish Brett were here to get the accolades, because similarly, I've followed up with company representatives since their visit, and they couldn't have been more pleased. And that hangar, whatever conversations you've had earlier this morning about different conditions that hangars might be in, that's about the most beautiful one we could have showcased. And it gave them an impression about how we regard ourselves. So from your very first, agenda item about the airport tower and what that means to curb appeal, or currently the lack thereof, and that broken window syndrome that so many of us in public policy think about with neighborhood development and maintenance, CVE just played that perfectly. So thank you. Thank you for all the arrangements that you and your staff did, Mayor and CVE. We were the first in their tour. They toured several sites within Utah, and they're, again, keen to us because of USU's dominance and excellent education that you offer. So I just want to continue to thank USU and your presence. And with that, similar kind of timeline on when they might make a decision. But since we were first, they kept, as I'm told, they kept comparing, well, in Logan this, well, how does their view, thoughts about, another airport in the southern part of the state, that, and we continued to rank very well. So again, I think when we showcase it, if we're going to be intentional about economic development, and if we're going to be intentional about the airport like a deep sea port or an inland port, using it as a commercial, magnet and center, then we have some really great opportunities. And I think in the last couple of months, we have some excellent, even if anecdotal, evidence of that. So I just wanted to give you that update. Any questions?
I just want to thank you, Sean, for all your help with that. I think it went really well. This is exactly what we should be doing, trying to figure out how we can stimulate more economic activity there. I just want to say one kind of funny thing. As we were coming to that hangar for the lunch meeting, the first thing I saw as we came into the parking lot was our tower, our dilapidated tower, and the broken windows, and I never noticed it so much as I did at that moment when we were coming with people and trying to show off the airport and how great of an asset we have there, and then we have these broken windows, like, kind of look like you would see bats flying out of the windows. Like, it looked really bad. I was kind of embarrassed about the tower, so I'm glad we're talking about doing something.
Well, and something like a project like this is only going to enhance what we have to offer, so.
Yeah. Agreed, and I know that all of these topics are very heavy. As you may each know, in a previous role, I can relate to all of the challenges that you're facing in today's conversation. So anyway, if there's no other questions about this agenda item, I'll move to the next. So the next kind of complements the first, and it definitely refers back to last year's dual grants that we'd used to fund Dr. Jones's assessment and recommendations. And that is the CEO board and their opportunity that I'm here to present for you. Just to give some context, the CEO board is short for the County Economic Opportunity Advisory Board, or CEO board for short. It is a state mandated entity that a county must utilize, must have standing and regularly utilize if they are to receive certain monies from the state legislature that are set aside for counties that are considered rural, of which we are. We are the largest county by population size considered rural, but nonetheless, this is a good opportunity for some flow through of funds to us. It was in part this funding that provided that assessment by Dr. Jones last year. The CEO board for Cache County is made up of 7 individuals, Executive Zook being one, Mayor Holly Kirk Jensen is another. Jamie Kirk Jensen, for the benefit of the audience members of the recording, is the Economic Development Director for Logan City. You have Jamie Andrus, the President CEO of the Cache Valley Chamber of Commerce, 2 council people, that is Sandy Goodlander and Mark Hurd. Mark happens to operate as our chairman. You have Mark Alexander of Bridgerland Technical College, the Entrepreneur and Innovation Center, and Brian Carver. my predecessor over at Bragg in the community development role, who's now with JUB Engineering, but represents a citizen-at-large member of that board. Those individuals have met as required to do for fiscal year 25 grant request and funding allocation, and they make a recommendation to the local legislative body. In this case, that's the Cache County Council, and the Cache County Council approved their recommendations, of which one of those items is $20,000 towards this body to use at your discretion with some caveats. That being what might be available as a match, some terms specifically yet to be decided upon by them, but they stopped short of saying exactly how they wanted this body to utilize it, other than to make sure it's not just preventative maintenance that's been deferred, or excuse me, deferred maintenance, maintenance that's been deferred for the sake of kind of keeping it open as is, with the idea that there might be some progression towards those suggestions that Dr. Jones had provided you in his report. Again, they stopped short of anything specific. Really, this is more them acknowledging, A, they think this is great because their perspective is economic development. So it is to grow the airport's prominence, function as an economic, tool for the community and the broader region, since Logan does serve as the hub for the micropolitan statistical area that goes into Idaho and Wyoming. And they know that many of those requests or suggestions by Dr. Jones are incredibly expensive, so they know this is chump change by comparison. But they still wanted to make that offer, that if it could be utilized somehow towards any other funding sources it might be paired with, to be matching funds for an FAA grant, an assessment that would not just, come back with some recommendation to sit in a 3-ring binder on a shelf, but be deployed at some future point. So I'm here to deliver that news from them, that if you'd like it, they've set it aside and the Cache County Council has approved it. There's no need to immediately make plans for that. This doesn't come with a stopwatch for the next couple of months, though it does have a 12-month cycle that technically would begin January 1, but functionally and practically kind of begins now, because they make the application for fiscal year 26. They start having some internal deliberations August, September, and then the county council should approve that October-ish. They've moved that timeline, so that's why I'm being a little less than definitive about whether it's October, November, or I just say October-ish. They've moved it several times in the last few years. So that's that. I'm happy to answer any particular questions you might have about that. Or we can leave that for the time being for your discussion and just be in contact with what you think over the next coming months, and I'll make my reports to the CEO board, or invite you to do the same. Well, our meetings are just as public as yours are, and you're welcome to them.
Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Connor, bring us up to date.
Hey, I'm Connor Butterfield with Lochner Engineering, the consultant for the airport. Was happy to hear that the airport's been doing great, chipping away on the 139 inspection. As far as updates for the paint project, bids will be, I will have the bids by the next meeting, the December meeting, so we'll have definitive numbers as to what the paint's going to cost. Still waiting to hear from the FAA as far as the expectation on the PAPI. I think we'll plan to move it, but still haven't heard back from the FAA engineer. So that's about all that I have.
Do you think there might be a chance they would reconsider?
Slight chance, yes. Not
Investment.
95.5.
Okay. Thank you. David?
Yes, for my fellow board members, just wanted to let you know, I just passed out a financial report. Mayor Daines and I had a discussion about our finances, and we thought it would be valuable to, at each meeting, share an updated financial report with the board so that you could see where we are, what expenditures have been made, how we're tracking in terms of our budget. So this is a year-to-date report, and if you on page 1 is the revenue, and then on the back on page 2 it shows what the year-to-date actual expenses are, what the total expenses are, which those will be the same because it's year-to-date. The next column shows what our annual budget is, so you can compare how much we've spent. The next is unexpended, so you can see how much more we have to spend. And then that last column, percentage, shows what percentage of our budget we've spent so far in the year. So the plan will be to have our finance department provide this each time. So every time we have a board meeting, you'll be able to get an updated financial report and see this. And if there's anything else you'd like, or different types of reports, or different information, just let me know and I'll have our finance department provide that to you.
Is there anything particular that you want to draw our attention to at this point?
No, just wanted to make sure you had the report, and if there's something you need, let me know.
Okay.
There was one item that I'd asked David about that just was a big number that was listed as software packages, and he let us know that that was actually just kind of the wrong title for it, essentially. So that's the Armstrong Master Plan contract. So it should be, you're going to relabel it as engineering services or
Yeah,
something.
professional services is
So
what it was supposed to be. That report you got had a mislabel on it. I believe this one is correct.
So great. Thank you for
Okay.
straightening that out.
Any other items from the board?
If I could just mention, when we adjourn, there's another meeting right after this, so if you want to continue to visit, maybe we could move out into the hallway so they can come in and start getting set up.
That starts
At 10, it starts at 10, yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Anything from the public? Joe, please.
Just Joe Bates, hangar owner. Just a couple of things. We seem to be constantly comparing storage building rates against lease rates. There seems to be a confusion there. We're paying ground lease. We're owning our own buildings. In a storage building, you're paying for the volume you rent, not the ground you're sitting on necessarily. The better comparison would be if you were paying a net lease on an airport hangar, paying monthly rent and the ground lease. That would be a better comparison than just saying, well, these people pay wildly higher rates. Of course they do. They're renting volume, not ground. The other thing would be that those storage units are contiguous. One goes up, they're liable to light up all the junk in the next one just because of the heat going through a wall, and it's not a firewall ever between storage units. Ours are separated by a minimum of 10 feet, often 20 or more. Hangar fires tend to go straight up, not out. Smoke goes everywhere. As a special effects guy will tell you, flames go straight up. So the chances of lighting up the next hangar are actually pretty slim, even if you burned up a whole airplane in the hangar. We don't store large amounts of gas. The average airplane holds maybe the amount of gas that a large SUV does. We don't worry about somebody's garage catching on fire and taking the whole house out, even though we don't require much of a firewall with an attached garage. So these are perhaps things we should consider. The other thing is that we have a pending agreement with USU as for the Part 139. We don't seem to get any new news on that.
We're still waiting for numbers, so we do not have a pending agreement.
We've been waiting for numbers for several months now.
I know. Yeah.
Perhaps we could.
Explanation. The source of those numbers was the bid on the paint, which we just received.
Well, good. Hopefully we're making progress on that because that's a large component of the airport's budget. So, thank you.
Okay. We'll now adjourn and anticipate the next meeting would be the first Thursday in December. Yes.
So can we expect any kind of feedback on this? Should we hold up on signing leases until the site issue has been resolved?
That would be fine. Yes.
Thank you.
So your turn, so no more public comment.
What?
First public comment allowed. I was wanting to make a comment, but I don't even know that it's allowed.
Quickly.
Oh, okay.
Come to the mic. Give us your name. Did you sign in?
I did. We rent a hangar. We have Katie Lee Coven. We rent a hangar at Echo 5 because we haven't been able to purchase one. We're on the wait list. So just a few things to request. The waiting list for those with the airport manager, that those be published or available. Those aren't, I don't know where those are located. Also, the Cache County on the site, there's a phone number, but not an email or other way to contact the airport manager other than by phone. I feel like an email so that things are in writing would be appropriate. And as you're looking at the lease discussion, I don't know, I did review, previous minutes from meetings and such, but consideration of lease rates for commercial versus personal seems like a very practical thing to look at because there's revenue generation, of course, with your commercial versus your personal. And then the last, really more a question about the proposal from the FBO, the map and the proposed plan. Is that going to be made public to Planning Commission for public comment and feedback? Is that the process? Okay, I just wasn't sure where to look for that since we weren't able to see it today.
It obviously is
Got
their
it.
choice when they submit to plan.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks so much. That's it.
Okay,
Thanks, Katie.
we stand adjourned.
Go to breakfast next week and we can find a date or visit about airport and otherwise.
Appreciate your analysis. The higher you